What happened to our microphones?
They are not attached into the... Okay, yeah. Not attached at all. You're
No, and this
now
one says
brandishing
on
it.
stage.
Which we are not.
Jake went digging in the closet and found different mic stands.
Are these better or just different?
Well, the other ones were sort of unnecessarily sort of extendable.
Pterodactyl line.
But hopefully these aren't blocking the view of the delicious, dimly lit, dramatic Rover 3500 SD1 behind us.
Heaven forbid.
On this episode of The Carmudgeon Show, my name is Jason Discount Sandler Cammisa, and that...
It's Derek Tam-Scott, and this is part of the Haggerty Podcast Network.
Yep. Today we're going to talk about things that are doing with cars. I think basically just a fleet update for both of us.
Yeah, that's functionally what it is, yeah. Just,
but we did talk about modding old cars. We talk about stereos.
Yep.
And troubleshooting and DMEs, which are digital motor electronics, and ISVs, which are idle stabilizer valves.
Mm-hmm.
There is a bunch of sort of general knowledge about retarded timing and other sort of stuff that we cover in this episode. So it's not a waste. It's actually, people could learn something.
Perhaps. Heaven forbid anyone learn anything on the Carmudgeon Show.
You know what you could learn?
Something about the benefits of the HTC.
I am wearing a Haggerty Drivers Club hoodie today.
Never stop driving, which you haven't factored on because you're not currently driving because you're recording the podcast.
You don't know that. I left my Scirocco outside in third gear driving around laps around the parking lot. If you like this content, would you please consider joining the Haggerty Drivers Club, which includes unlimited flatbed tows for all of your classic vehicles that are available 24/7. There's too many data points on that. Anyway, because it's unlimited 24/7 guaranteed flatbed tows for all of your classic vehicles, a subscription to our award-winning magazine, discounts and on special events and VIP stuff, and unlimited access to our valuation tools. There's a link below. If you'd like to click there, go for it. And Derek is going to clap. We're going to go right into it.
Someone actually said that we should add a fifth random thing that we decide is part of the Haggerty Drivers Club each week. It's like, and it includes a subscription to... not our award-winning magazine. I don't know, unlimited dishwasher pods or something like that.
Yeah, but you know there's like some sweepstakes law or something that we're going to violate. Also, Haggerty is an insurance company, and they're very tightly regulated. Like, no matter how many times I ask, they won't give me a commission based on insurance policies I sell because something blah, 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 illegal, not my problem.
A free trip to Mars. Anyway.
Hey guys, this episode is sponsored by Fredestein Tires. Maybe snow is on the way and you're ready to put your mind at ease with WinTrack Pro's confident control and maximum grip in the cold.
Their award-winning tires are backed by over a century of European innovation and are waiting for you to experience all they have to offer.
Discover your next tire at Fredestein.com. It's time to hear from Fredestein Tires.
They're bringing better performance to the roads with their award-winning tires backed by over a century of European innovation.
Not to mention a partnership with Ital Design, founded by legendary designer Giorgetto Giugiaro.
Demand a better tire. Demand Fredestein.
Interested in checking out the tires yourself? If you're in Los Angeles this weekend, which is Saturday 11/9, be sure to stop by Radwood at the Port of LA.
Not only for a look at some amazing cars equipped with Fredestein tires, but also for the chance to get behind the wheel of one or even win a set of tires for your car.
I will be at Radwood.
I will not, but my car might be, if it makes it. Possibly even on Fredestein tires.
Self-driving?
My business partner is driving it down.
Disappointing.
I'm doing a track day. Not at Radwood.
Extra disappointing.
I don't even remember what cars I own.
Who are you? Where are we?
That part I know.
What the fuck is that?
What do you mean? It's the world's finest Rover SD1.
It is.
It's probably not the world's finest. It's probably America's finest. Maybe Canada's finest, too.
Canada is America.
Wow.
They will get upset if you don't point that out. Yes,
North America.
That is a Rover SD1 in the background that made it here under its own power.
It's gone everywhere that it's ever gone under its own power, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's true. Well,
while we've known it.
Yeah.
Certainly on this odometer.
I am very conflicted because I really am in love with the idea of simplifying my automotive collection down to a smaller number of cars, maybe to one digit instead of two, and maybe not even 9, maybe even less than that. But I love the variation and experience that I get.
Yes.
That car is unlike anything else I own.
Yes. I'm a big fan of that when it comes to collections. A lot of people, I have talked about this before, but you walk in their garage and they're like, you have like 11,000 versions of the same damn car. You know, whether it's a lot of BMWs or a lot of Porsches or a lot of Ferraris. There's so many different, I mean, people collect things for different reasons. And some people collect them because it's like, oh, well, I have to have a complete picture representation of what this company does. Other people are like, I just want different experiences. Yeah. And those people are the people I usually resonate most with.
I feel like
resonate most with me.
I feel like even though I'm not so brand agnostic as to, you know, someone who has 10 or 12 or 15 or 5 cars from one manufacturer, all of my cars are similar in that they're lightweight, high revving.
Had been similar. Were similar.
Had been prior to that.
Yes.
But, you know, they're all sort of lightweight, engine focused, steering, suspension, chassis tuning.
Ass hauling cars.
Yeah.
On technical road.
Yep. And then you get like the Beat, which is not hauling anything, including ass, or getting me any, for being honest. But it's still that sort of high revving vocal engine thing. And then
it's a sports car formula, functionally.
Yeah. I mean, it's effectively the same car as the Ferrari.
Yes,
and
just
the Lotus.
Scaled down to a quarter scale.
Yeah.
Maybe a 20% scale.
I mean, in weight, it's
50%.
Slightly more than half of what the 308 was. The 308 was 3020 and the Beat is 1683. Sad that I know these things, isn't it?
Is it?
Just kind of goes to show
I
that I
don't feel sad. I feel...
You don't know what... You're not looking at my life as a complete picture because you might be sad then.
Oh, okay. Well, that's possible. So the Rover broke the mold. I could also argue maybe the Ferrari broke the mold.
I mean, certainly because those are both V8s and all of my cars historically have been 3, 4, and 6-cylinder cars.
I would say the thing about the Ferrari that breaks the mold is that most of the cars you have are great at 10 tenths or 11 tenths, and I would say the Ferrari is great up to 8 or 8.5 tenths. It's a car that at the limit is not the best part of using it, in my opinion.
No, and actually how long has it been? 5 years that I've had that car? I'm not sure I've
6
really driven it to the limit all that much. I mean, I've definitely slid around a couple corners. Like it will power oversteer in first and second. So that, you know, off of a red light, so I will kind of kick it sideways, which is unusual for a mid-engine car to be able to do it with such ease. But I'm not blasting on a back road in that car at any speed whatsoever. Like it's just unassisted steering and
not beyond 8.5 tenths.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That is great up until 0 tenths.
Yeah,
I mean,
is there an in motion situation in which it is really?
I like
comes
that.
Into its own
cruising.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like a big lazy V8. It's not. It's 3.5 liters, so it's not big, but it is a lazy V8, and it's kind of lovely on the highway. It's great seats, great visibility. The whole car shakes tremendously.
Hopefully, that's just a wheel balance issue. We think.
I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? I keep going back and forth because I genuinely thought about selling it, especially when the master cylinder failed and the parts are not available, or the master cylinder is not available. So I sort of rebuilt it. It seems to work.
Yeah, everyone was like, why don't you just do it yourself? And you're like, why don't I?
Yes, and I got in there and I was pretty scared. But
Have you died yet while driving it?
I've barely driven it, but no.
Okay.
But
so
no,
far,
it will lock up the fronts. I mean, I did sort of put it through its paces. No, the problem is I drove it, and then I also went through and I found a big vacuum leak and found the timing was off. So now the surging that it did has always done since we first picked it up was just a light at idle is gone. And that surge actually happened on the highway too. You'd sort of get
as though you were turning the air conditioning on and off.
Yes, and that was timing. Timing was way too far advanced. And so, it starts and runs perfectly. And
you have missed an opportunity to use the word retarded in an factually like an acceptable fashion if you care to.
I don't use that term, Derek.
Okay. Well, I was just pointing out the opportunity existed. You could have used it.
I retarded the timing.
Yes. Okay, there you go.
De-advanced. Anyway, so I think I might keep it now. I don't know what to do. How the hell am I going to... The scary thing is, remember, I went 30 years from high school driving an SD1 to never sitting in one again. And I fear in 30 years, I don't know if I'll be driving. which is a really upsetting thing. I mean, I hope to be driving, but who knows what the hell's good. 30 years is a long time, and I may never see another one.
Yeah, but the question is, have you extracted all the value out of it? So then you keep it until that has happened.
The problem is what I want to do with that car is mod the shit out of it. And why
not?
Do I need another project? Here's the thing. It's a 3.5 liter V8 that makes 133 horsepower. Mm-hmm. And I know it's capable of 200 with just minor mods. Mm-hmm. And then if I put different pistons in it, like if I pull the motor and put high compression pistons in it and a cam, it's 200 plus spicy horsepower.
You know, the external dimensions of that engine are such that they made a 5-liter version of it also.
That's the real problem, because then that becomes a 300 horsepower plus fire-breathing monster that sounds like a NASCAR, and I kind of think that's what should be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it sounds like you're not done with it.
No.
I was feeling a little bit done with the Citroën because it's a complex, it's an unconventional car, and it has some complexity to it, and the problem was I didn't have anybody I really trusted to work on it. And those cars are so specialized and unique that it was getting sort of discouraging to try and keep it around in a way that made me happy. There was just like an ever-growing list of little things that I wanted to correct. And I was like, who can I trust? And then it started leaking hydraulic fluid, and that's like the Citroën specific system that's actually was also used in Rolls Royces and Bentleys. And I went to the annual Citroën Club meet, which is hilarious.
Can't even imagine.
It's really... I don't know. The people are as weird as you would expect, and largely geriatric, although there was one other person in his 30s there, which was shocking. I thought I was going to be the youngest person by 1 to 2 decades, and I wasn't. So,
congrats.
Yes, I know. But most of this old French guy came up to me and he said, "Why are you here? Like, what is your interest in this car? Why did you buy one of these cars?" And
pardonnez-moi, mais what is wrong with you?
Yeah, so I told him I had experienced a lot of them in the course of doing my work and decided that they were pretty cool and wanted to have one. But anyway, in the attending this event sort of reinvigorated my interest and enthusiasm for finding a way to make it work, and made sort of contact with people, because there's 2 people on the planet, not on the planet. There's 2 people in Northern California who can work on these cars, and one of them has just an enormous backlog out the door, and the other guy is like, I think he has a lift in his shop now, but for ages he had no lift in his shop, and he was just like, there's space for 3 cars in there, and it was just like, and you look around, there's 50, 60, 70 Citroëns, and you see why there's only, there's a huge backlog for both of these guys. But anyway, I sort of found someone who said, yeah, just text me and we'll figure it out. I think we can get you in 2 weeks and we'll make it happen, and blah, blah, blah. And so that sort of solves the problem, which is like, how do I properly look after this car?
You learn to do it yourself.
Yeah, I know. It's just a little bit spooky, and especially the hydraulic system, because it controls the steering and the brakes and the suspension. And so, the idea of losing all the hydraulic fluid and losing all of those systems is a little bit sort of alarming.
Terrifying,
I think. is maybe one word for it. So finding sort of the solution to make sure you find someone that you really like and trust to work on the car, who knows them. Right? Because you just bring it to anyone with one of those cars, you're going to pay for their learning curve, and it's going to end up messed up also. Yeah. And I might die as well.
Well, I did look when I got the Scirocco 127 years ago. The finding a shop who would work on them was difficult, and ultimately that's why I did all the work myself and I had to learn. I couldn't afford to pay somebody, and no one else was really qualified to do it anyway. And that wasn't that rare of a car.
I feel like there are good specialists here now. But we live in an area where there's a high concentration of interesting cars. If I was trying to do this I'm going to choose some random Midwestern place where they're like, the world's most preeminent specialist of Citroën is actually located in Des Moines, Iowa. Yeah. I mean, not probably actually true.
I mean, it is a French-sounding name of a city.
Yes, it should be Des Moines. Des Moines. So, yeah, I mean, it depends where you live. And this certainly happens with people when they're like, yeah, should I buy vintage Ferrari, and I live in Charleston. I'm just playing Mad Libs here. Okay. But yeah, it's a real consideration. We're, I think, spoiled to live somewhere where there are specialists of Alfa Romeo, vintage Alfa Romeos, and
Saabs.
Ferraris, and sobs and
all kinds of weird shit.
Yeah.
Speaking of working on cars, I can now announce that every single one of my cars, with the exception of the e-Golf, now has fresh brake fluid in it. Ish.
Fresh-ish.
Ish. So everything got a brake fluid swap except the Beat, because I don't have an adapter for the brake fluid reservoir. Well, there are two in that car. One tiny little one for the clutch and one slightly larger one for the brake fluid. The brake fluid tested, according to our little tester, at 0%, so or whatever it was fine. The clutch fluid looks original. It's terrible, and it was more than 5. But I couldn't bleed it, and I didn't have anyone else there to help me sort of bleed it with the pressure, the pedal. So I did suck the reservoir dry, clean it out, and put new fluid in there. And it's amazing. So you pump that clutch pedal twice, and the amount of shit that comes out of the line back in there is impressive. So at some point, I will bleed that whole system again. But meantime, thank you for tormenting me into bleeding every one of I bled 9 fucking sets of brakes.
I find it sort of therapeutic. Just the idea that you're removing water from the braking system, it gives me sort of...
The crazy one was the E30, which I had marked, the wagon, I had marked in my spreadsheet as having 10.5-year-old or almost 11-year-old brake fluid. I'm like, there's no way it's gone this long. But the test came back with it's marginal. Depending on when I did the test, it was either, 2 green dots and 1 yellow or whatever. It was never in the red. Mm-hmm. But I went to go bleed that, and that's ATE Super Blue.
Okay, yeah. So that's vintage.
That's vintage. It's got to be 10 years since they've made that illegal.
I just used my last ATE Super Blue, which was a sort of moment of silence.
That was
I had
cool
it
stuff.
sitting on the shelf. Yeah, it was great to alternate between blue and not, so you could tell when you were done flushing the fluid.
Yeah, because otherwise, especially one of the cars was the Scirocco, actually. The brake fluid was 10 years old, and it was spotless.
Really?
Now, it did measure out in the red zone for water, and that's because the reservoir has a little vent with a rubber nipple on it, and the rubber nipple's gone, and it has been since I've owned the car for all these years. So there is some atmospheric air. But the fluid looked absolutely perfect. So I'm just bleeding and waiting and waiting.
I have no idea. This seems like enough.
Still clean.
Yeah.
So, it is what it is. But yes, all the cars now have fresh brake fluid, thanks to you.
I think Well, I buy cars at a higher rate than you, so I think the 944 definitely should have that. It no longer has a 14-year-old timing belt.
Congratulations.
Yeah, that was alarming. I drove it back 1,000 miles, and then I got home and found the sticker when I was poking around in the engine compartment for when the last timing belt was. The guy was like, yeah, the last timing belt was at 150,000 kilometers, and it's now at 170,000 kilometers, which was true, but he also did not mention that he did not own it when this happened. Right. But the last timing belt was in 2010.
Long time.
Yeah,
how did it look? Fine?
Yeah, it looked okay, but just the idea that, we have a mutual friend who was going to do a 944 timing belt, and the shop could get him in after Christmas, and on Christmas Day, he's like, I'm going to go for a drive in the Porsche because it's Christmas Day, and then the timing belt broke as soon as he started it.
But my question is, how old and how many miles? I think we're all getting a little bit paranoid about the timing. Let's talk about this timing belt issue. I'm hearing now, and everyone's lately I'm hearing 4 years.
Yeah, I heard 3 years recently in a Ferrari context.
And, we have one friend who's got a Monte LT, and the belt is, I think, 4 years old, and he wants to do the belt. He wants to sell the car, and he wants to do a belt before he sells them. There's nothing wrong with that belt. And his point is, in the Ferrari world, I have to do new belts or I'm costing myself money. And this is just, it needs to end.
Yes, that is true. And that is what I tell people when they are buying cars and are asking about buying Ferraris and they're asking about the timing belts. And I say, look, all of us who own these cars and the mechanics I all know who own them, they will happily double the interval that's recommended, which is, 5 years. And I think that you can, without even thinking about it, go to 7 years. Mm-hmm. But if you want to sell it, then I recommend that you have it be current. Otherwise, people will it's worth it just to get rid of, if you're going to put it on Bring a Trailer, it's worth it just to get rid of the sort of
fucking pests in the comments.
the apocalyptic comments and the sort of well, if they let the timing belt go this long, then surely the whole rest of the car must be an absolute shit heap because, what a negligent owner who shouldn't even be entrusted with one of these cars. And meanwhile, this person, has in their garage, let me be careful here what I select. Something that is very much definitely not a timing belt Ferrari, shall we say.
Yeah, I don't, this I think we've talked about this before. You know, when I bought a house when I was 22 in Pennsylvania. It was like $77,000, which I still laugh about that. You could buy an actual nice house. And when I bought the house, the inspection report came back that the hot water tank was well beyond its expected life. And then 6 years later, I sold the house and I had replaced everything in the house. I mean, I did a whole bunch of stuff. I did a bunch of upgrades. I did a new kitchen. And while I was there and finishing the basement, I thought, this is my time to replace everything before I put a ceiling in there and drywall it all in. So I replaced all of the plumbing in the house because it was just old and whatever. Let me just do it now before I drywall this. So the entire interior of the house got new plumbing. Any electrical that went to the kitchen that was under the new roof was replaced. I went crazy and did it all because I'm that kind of a nut job. When I went to go sell the house, an offer came in, like I think the day I listed it, over asking, and it was, it was a perfect situation. And the seller said they would only buy the house if I put a new hot water tank in. A buyer that would only do it if I put a new hot water tank in. And my response was no. And we went back and forth a couple times, and I wrote them a letter to their agent. And I said, listen, I'm the type of person that replaced preventatively wiring and plumbing, and I did everything this house needed and everything I expected it to need for the next 20 years. If I didn't replace the hot water tank, it's because it didn't need to be done, and it was wasteful to do so. And we got into a deadlock. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not selling you the fucking house. You can go fuck yourself. This is wasteful. My agent wound up springing the $260 or whatever for a new hot water tank, but I just crossed my arms and I'm like, this is just stupid, and I'm not doing it out of principle. and I kind of feel like the same way on a Ferrari timing belt or a timing belt on any car. I mean, I think the Cabby's timing belt, it's 12 years old, but on that car, it's very easy for me to look at it, and I can look at it and see the rubber is still moist and looks absolutely perfect. There are no cracking. There's no marks in it. The car's driven regularly.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it. I'm doing it now, but I wasn't going to do it 7 or 8 years ago when the belt was 3 or 4 years old. It's just stupid.
Yeah, I was talking to my co-founder who, has grown up wrenching on vintage Ferraris, and his father started doing this in the 70s. And I was talking to them about this subject. And between them, they have seen one timing belt fail on a Ferrari. And the failure mechanism was that the teeth on the belt separated from the belt itself. And so then it jumps timing. And they said that's the only one they've ever seen fail. And that one was like maybe had never ever been done, and it was on a 308.
So it was 30 or 40 years old.
Yeah, it was it was certainly like 15 plus years old.
Yeah. I mean, when I've talked to Ferrari mechanics, they say the same thing. Their own cars are 12, 15 years, something like that.
Yeah.
I guess it all, look, if a car sat for 10 years,
yes,
we've talked about this, again, with the belt sort of hyper extended in one position and loose
or
elsewhere.
like kinked, basically.
Sure. I can see do it, as part of resurrecting a car. But my God, something that's driven regularly, this is just now stupid.
Yeah.
But I have seen E30, so M20 engine BMW E30s snap belts at 40, 50,000 miles after 4 or 5 years or 6 years. It can
you're supposed
happen.
to do it at 30?
They were originally 660, and now the sort of recommendation is 545, 550, somewhere in there. And that's just to be on the safe side.
Well, Ferraris, it's always time, not mileage.
Well, and I think that's it's because no one puts...
Because nobody drives those cars enough to...
But I certainly would do an E30 timing belt at 45,000, 40,000 miles even, but I don't drive them
I think the Ferrari number's 30.
Is it really that low?
Yeah, but nobody ever goes 30,000 miles on a Ferrari in 5 years.
Yeah.
Almost
which
nobody.
Is pretty sad if you think about it. That's not that many miles per year.
Yeah, I mean, a 1991 Testarossa with 30,000 miles is like, oh, that's not that low of a mile car. There's a lot of like 16 and 8,000 mile cars out there. That have seen, well, how old are they? 35 years and 5 years. That means I've seen 6 timing belt services.
That's so crazy. You could have bought the car again.
Yes, correct.
For what you invested in.
That's part of the reason why like 348s and 355s are sort of, for a long time when they were cheap cars, people would just neglect the maintenance because it was $10,000 to do a timing belt on one of those cars.
Although you didn't need to do it. I mean, that's neglecting maintenance on something that it didn't actually need.
Yeah, but if they're sitting, then you start to get a little anxious, and then the water pump is leaking. So you're like, oh, we got to get the water pump out because it's weeping. And then you're like, you should do the timing belt, and you should do the tensioners, and you should do the cam seals maybe while you're in there too, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I think Ferrari
ends up being $10,000.
Right, well, or 20 or 30. I mean, I just saw...
Yes, depending what else
I just saw it was a GT4 maybe. There was some Ferrari that I just saw that just had $30,000 or $40,000 worth of quote unquote maintenance done.
Well, it's an old car at this point, then you're...
What the fuck? No, it wasn't
like you do all the rubber and the
engine.
suspension, right? And so then all the A-arms come out and then they all get powder coated. And then you're like, well, we've got the shocks out, so we should have the shocks rebuilt. You got to do the bushings at the top of the shocks and the bottom of the shocks. You got to do like each A-arm, it's double wishbone. So each A-arm has 3 bushings on it. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, there's 24 bushings plus 4 more or 2 more in each shock.
This is not maintenance. That's a vehicular rebuild.
Yes.
I mean, I guess that's the difference between, for anyone else.
But it's 40-year-old rubber, it'll make a difference.
Yeah, it'll make a difference. But I think the difference between sort of collector grade cars and normal cars is most people just accept sort of as cars age, at some point I'll do suspension bushings, where Ferrari people are like, well, every 10 years, everything gets done, including repainting valve covers and re-crackle finishing shit. It's just, I don't know. I think it's wasteful.
Yeah, I mean, and it depends on the type of person you are. Again, right? Some people really like fresh, shiny, restored cars, and other people like very sort of original patina sort of. Well, with a car that's not valuable, you don't really generally make that decision. Every so often, there's some wackadoodle person who spends just massive money restoring something to exceptional standards that still isn't worth anything afterwards. It's done as a labor of love or as a project.
Those are called heroes.
Yeah, they are, because then you get to see an exceptionally nice example of something that you never see a nice example of, and that's pretty cool. Unless it's a really well preserved original car. Ferraris are valuable enough that the general sort of response is, well, this is it's an object of historical significance that should be preserved or presented or maintained in the state in which it originally existed, and it's worth sort of presenting the car like that. And then, the same token, we have a client who likes things to be really original and patinaed, and he has like 3 or 4 356s with original paint and that are spectacularly, some patina but really nice. And like his Ferrari, when he had the engine rebuilt, he said, "Do not refinish anything. It's never been restored. I don't want you to, refinish the valve covers even though there's chipped paint on them." And that's actually slightly harder to do as a mechanic because you have to be super careful with all the finishes and keep them intact as you're blowing the motor apart, as opposed to normally you can sort of just rip it out of there and then it's all going to get refinished anyway, so it doesn't matter if the finishes get harmed. So as you're disassembling everything, you have to be very careful. Everything has to be done with wood and instead of metal tools where possible for breaking things open and all that stuff.
I mean, the way I see it is that there's chipping paint on it, whatever, that's patina, and anything that happens during a service is also patina, so it gets a free pass. But hey,
well, this is a car that could go to Pebble Beach, and so you want it to be in the best possible condition, but unrestored.
I don't think I have any cars that would go.
No, neither do I. Although we're thinking that maybe we'll try and bring our 365 GT4 2+2 if we can get it.
The Quasette?
No, it's like the Quasette, but it's not a Quasette. It's a regular 3-box car.
To Pebble?
Perhaps.
What's going on at Pebble that would allow such a car in?
Nothing. It's just a Ferrari. It's a vintage Ferrari.
In that case, I mean, all it takes is just a vintage Ferrari.
It has to be very well presented.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's fancy. I didn't realize you're gonna stop talking to me if you keep.
No, I mean, I for my own personal consumption, I'm really excited about whatever shitbox that I have.
Okay.
Or obscure. So anyway, that's what's happening in my automotive sphere.
My automotive sphere has been consumed the last 2 weekends with just kind of getting all the cars up to speed. And by that, I mean drivable again, getting that one, the Rover drivable with a sort of freshly rebuilt master cylinder. And then the Cabby, I think I talked about on Instagram, but I don't think I said, I thought was self-machining its transmission.
Oh yes, because you had a lot of sparkles when you changed.
A lot of sparkles when I changed the fluid. But then I drove it again once, and I'm like, I probably got to pull this thing off the road. It's just making terrible noises
from the gearbox,
from something. And so I put it up in the air, and I sort of jacked up the axles to get them so they're not the CV boots aren't hitting anything, because they hit the sway bar mounts
at full droop.
And I had it sitting there at 45 miles an hour, and it's making some, in fifth gear, just kind of hanging out. I'm like, it's making some pretty nasty noises. And let me just disconnect the driver axle just to see what happens. Noise stopped.
So you just need an axle or
I think it's a wheel bearing.
Wheel bearing.
I think it's a wheel bearing. The weird thing is that the car is so loud.
Does it have any like play or anything like that?
No play, no weirdness. And I know that I've done sort of slaloming and the noise doesn't change. After I now put it all back together, I took it for another drive and it's definitely changing. I get a when it's
in the cabbie.
In the cabbie. So Beatrice needs a wheel bearing.
I think my wagon needs a wheel bearing too.
So changing left to right, sort of rumble that changes left to right?
No, there's just always been a sort of like rumble that the car has had, and one of the wheel bearings did fail in a pretty somewhat spectacular fashion, enough that it was ruining the brake rotor.
That's a big failure. That's an unusual failure.
Yeah, so then that causes me to suspect the rest of the wheel bearings. And I feel like the noise got less pronounced after we did the one wheel bearing. The problem with those wheel bearings in the back of those cars is that like you have to blow the whole back of the car apart.
Right.
And so it was like, and it's a very invasive procedure. So it's a lot of effort to find out whether that problem is actually the cause of that problem. But it's never driven as smoothly or sort of quietly as any other W124.
Did you do drive shaft?
I've sort of checked the drive shaft and ran it while it was on the lift and sort of observed it. I haven't done the drive shaft, but I think it was also somewhat recently redone as part of the really heavy maintenance that the car received.
This is the problem with sort of vibration and noise like that. It's really difficult.
The worst.
It's the worst to try to find. So what I'm going to do on the cabbie is I'm going to throw an axle in it just to make sure it's not a CV. So the inner CVs...
Axles are cheap.
Yeah, it's like $120. Yeah. So the inner CVs will typically make themselves known under load. You'll get a vibration through the wheel, through the whole driveline under load. That's road speed dependent, load dependent. The outer CVs on those cars tend to just click at full left or full right. It makes some nasty noises. This one is a moaning rumble, as you know, as it's spinning it in the air. And that...
Did you go with a stethoscope?
I did. Well, I didn't have a stethoscope, but I did the old screwdriver trick. And if I listen to the wheel bearing on the passenger side, I hear a whoosh. It's more of a whoosh as it comes down. On the driver's side, it's a grinding. There's also, once a revolution, is a little bit of a click on top of it, but a grinding sound. So
on a motorcycle, it's very, very obvious when a wheel bearing goes because you feel like the actual like gravelly, scratchy texture through the bars.
That'd be nice.
Directly to your hands. It's a very weird experience.
I mean, I think motorcycles have stronger structures than a Mark I Volkswagen Cabriolet. So I feel it through the wheel. I feel it through the floor. I feel it everywhere. But this, I finally just did a run where it killed the engine at like 60 miles an hour and just coasting, and you can kind of feel it. And slaloming left, right, it is changing. And it wasn't before. I know I tried. So I'm going to do axle first, then both front wheel bearings, because if one's going, they're both going. Yeah. And then if that doesn't work, then I'll pull the transmission. I found a local, thanks to Instagram, a local shop has a Volkswagen 020 transmission specialist in it. And they will give me a core tranny. So I can just throw in a transmission in, give them back mine, and the car's right back on the road. And it's going to be a 5, 6, 7 hour job. So I'm hoping it doesn't result in that. But that'd be nice. Meanwhile, Beatrice just completed a track day.
Barely.
Well, it was fine. I will say that it was the worst handling E30 I've ever driven, ever, until I reattached the rear sway bar, which had ripped itself from the... So I gave the car for a buddy to drive in a track day. Randy Pope shows up. So Randy hears about this. He's like, I want to instruct. And just...
On your invitation, it should be added.
No. I mentioned in passing, hey, Beatrice is going to do, my buddy's doing a second track day in Beatrice, and Randy's like, I'm going to instruct. And I'm like, what do you mean you're going to instruct? But he's Randy fucking Popst. So he just emailed the organizers, and I would like to instruct so-and-so on such a day. Is that okay? And they just told the person who was the instructor, you are now fired, Randy Popst, you're in. But I left the rear sway bar disconnected because it's Sonoma. There are a lot of walls there. And I thought, okay, not only is this a relatively inexperienced driver, but there's a track with a lot of walls. And this car tends to bite. It's a semi-trailing arm rear end.
Yes, unannounced backwards.
Yeah, lift off oversteer. I also, for the first time ever, got the track day insurance that Hagerty offers. And I thought, this is not bad. It was $155.
Yeah, that's because the car is cheap.
Yep.
I've thought about bringing my 911 and it was like $1,000.
Yeah, because that car is worth literally 10 times what Beatrice is worth. But it was just a nice peace of mind thinking like, okay, if he writes off the car, I can just go buy another one. It's not like I don't have an emotional connection to the car, and it's not going to ruin his life to have to buy me a new car. So the car drove fine, and then I got in it, and Randy, it was the first time Randy's ever driven with me on track, like not doing stunt driving stuff. Mm-hmm. And he was like, man, you are doing nothing but asking for understeer. Be patient. And I just couldn't drive around the car. It was so fucking terrible.
The understeer.
And the understeer was so terrible. So then finally later on, I just reconnected and took him out. And he's like, that's more like it. And I'm like, yeah, apparently I can't drive around that much understeer.
Which is amusing. Well, all of the front wheel drive cars you have are very assy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have to. I mean, I was trail braking this E30 in, and it was pushing under trail braking, and then pushing under power, and pushing under. I just couldn't stop it. And Randy was able to drive around it. He got in the car and it was like, "Oh shit, I see what you mean," but he was never able to get it to rotate. But he was also not plowing through all the stuff because he knew enough to bring his minimum speeds down enough to just tolerate this. Anyway. But on the way home, that car's got a wheel bearing that's gone. Like, oh God, it went from being brake fluid month to wheel bearing month.
Oh yeah, I think I might be there too. I'm having ECU month also. The first time you ever drove my 964, which was in 2012, you commented that sometimes when you give it throttle inputs, it's just like, fuck you, you can't have that.
Which Motronic often does.
Yes, and the car has kind of always done that. It's always done that thing that Motronic cars do, which is when you put the clutch in at like 1,500 RPM rolling up to a stop, the engine just dies. Yeah. And I've had, I don't know, at least half a dozen Motronic cars between BMWs and Porsches. And that's just a thing that they do, especially when they're cold. The car's always done some kind of weird stuff. Sometimes when it's warm, you just leave it idling in neutral and the idle goes and it's kind of all over. So I did the idle control valve and the behavior changed, but I don't think it was for the better, but it did change. The idle control valve for that car used to be like $700 or $800.
Yeesh.
And I sort of was like, I can't do that. That's insane. And like 5 years went by and I found someone that had them for like $300 or something. So I bought one for $300 and put it in and it changed, but it still was kind of miserable. And the car got kind of worse and worse and worse. And then my dad has also a 964. And I was just like, hey, can I borrow your ECU? Actually, I didn't ask him. He was out of town for like 3 weeks.
The garage.
He was out of town for like 3 weeks. And I was like, I just have to know. So I drove my car over to his house and took the ECU out of his car and put it in my car. And it was perfect. Just absolutely perfect.
That's so
and
wild.
So I was like, okay. So I sent the ECU to a place to rebuild it. And he's like, would you do me a favor and just check the following things? I was like, ugh. So now I have to ask my dad because he's back from his trip to borrow his ECU. And he was like, make sure that the intake resonance flap is functioning when you turn the car on and make sure you're actually getting full throttle when you open the throttle. And then make sure it's a dual distributor car. It's twin plug. Make sure that it's running on both distributors. And so I unplug one distributor and sure enough, the car doesn't start. So it only has single plug ignition. I have no idea for how long.
Oh my God.
Failed module. And then
failed what module?
The ignition module. There's two ignition modules.
Which is a different module than DME.
Yes, correct. Okay. There's it's like a coil probably.
It's the final stage resistor. Basically, it's the thing that actually makes the voltage, right? Sends it out. Not the coil, but it's distributes. Okay. Huh.
So,
wow.
So it was a single plug car, but it actually ran and drove fine on the good ECU for my dad's car, even though it was a single plug. So I have had the ECU rebuilt. It's in the mail now. I'm excited to see how that goes. And the ignition coils are the ignition modules are both on order.
Okay, so we need to talk about this ECU rebuilt thing because this is something I've never heard of. So did he test it and find that there were actual flaws?
Well, so I don't believe so because he called me and he was like, this thing looks okay to me. And I was like, well, it drove a lot differently on this ECU, on my dad's ECU, which has already been rebuilt. And the reason his ECU was rebuilt is because the car would sometimes just refuse to start or turn itself off while driving. And then you wait some number of minutes on the side of the road and then it starts. And it just had all kinds of wacky problems. And so he sent the ECU into some place and they like go through and I think look at the solders and make sure that none of them are cracked or renew them all or whatever. But, it was like a few $100 or maybe it was $1,000 to rebuild the ECU. And then it came back and the car has been faultless for him ever since. So
So is it just inspecting, or is it actually proactively replacing every resistor?
I have no idea.
Wow,
I have
this
no
is
idea.
fascinating.
I think there are some. They look like they've sent. I've seen photos of what they're doing. There's definitely burned resistors that get replaced, and then they also like look at all the joints. I think and resolder, or maybe they resolder them all. I don't know. I don't know what's involved.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that had dramatically improved the behavior of my dad's car, and I mean the ECU his ECU in my car worked very well. So it was nice to have a parts car.
That's really cool.
At my disposal to help diagnose the problem, because the car was becoming undrivable, and it got sort of progressively worse over a dozen years. And so you sort of just like, I don't know, this car's kind of tricky to drive and has a light flywheel, and you sort of make excuses. But it reached the point where, and it would just like behave very inconsistently, or you'd start to brush the throttle to give it throttle to pull away, and the car just turns off. Like it's not like the clutch is not even in the friction zone yet. And you're like, am I that bad at driving a manual such that like the car just turns itself off? So it was doing all sorts of wacky stuff that was getting progressively more like annoying and pronounced. And it finally reached the point where I was like, okay, I can't. Like it annoys me every time I drive this car to try and drive around this stuff. So
a friend just showed up at my place with his 993, and he was like, "Yeah, I think it's got a bad idle control valve, something." And he replaced something, and it wasn't. I had him clean. I had him pull out the idle control valve and clean it. Yep. And so, for those not familiar with Motronic, basically these systems use a barn door or a hot airflow meter, some one way or another measure airflow, and it matches the amount of fuel with that. However, idle speed is controlled by what is effectively just an electronic throttle that opens or closes to allow more or less air in, and it's activated only below some RPM, usually 1300 or 1500, something like that. And that's the sort of fine tuning on the idle. So Motronic cars are famous for an idle surge or a hunt, which is rum, 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 like a 1 hertz flare up and back down, and that's the valve getting slower to respond, and so it can't respond quickly. You unplug them, and they don't move, and the car will typically idle more smoothly, but either too low, too high, or whatever. Exactly.
Yes.
And so all of my Bosch injected cars have idle stabilizer valves. The CIS works the same way. So I said, just bring it over, let's clean it out and put it back in and see if it changes anything. Didn't change anything, but the car's sitting there idling absolutely perfect, like perfect idle, and then it just goes fucking berserk. It's, and then died. And I'm like, what the fuck was that? And he's like, that's what it does. And so starts immediately right back up, idles perfectly, and then some amount of time later, with 30 seconds, a minute, 3 months, it would start the same thing: stumble, surge, and die. So okay, apparently he needs a rebuilt. Apparently the same problem on 993.
Well, has he replaced the idle control valve yet?
I think he did years ago. And it's sort of done this for years. Where it's happy, dies.
Find someone else. That car I know has it's a Vario Cam car. Find someone else with a Vario Cam 993 who's willing to swap.
Vario Ram or Vario Cam?
Vario Ram. Sorry, Vario Cam is the system that is used in the 968. Maybe it was used in the 996
Vario Cam
also.
is Porsche term for
variable valve timing. But it was introduced on the 968. Was the first car that.
Yeah, you can't do it on a single cam car. 968 is twin cam.
Yes.
And so 993, which was the M60 family or whatever of flat sixes, went to twin cam, and that's why they could use Vario Cam. Sorry, nerd.
Okay.
But yeah, his Vario Ram car.
Yes.
Also twin plug, right?
Yes.
So that's an interesting. I never thought you could just unplug one distributor. Although his probably doesn't have distributors. I don't know. No,
yeah, I can look in there and see how it looks. I only know how it looks in the 964.
The whole thing is weird to have 12 plugs for.
Yes, and the second one is driven off of the first one with a belt, which was originally known for overheating and braking. And so there's a factory recall, which is basically you add a little air intake to the distributor housing, and then cooling air gets admitted, and then the belt doesn't overheat and break. So that was a factory recall.
What?
Yeah,
Hold on.
So the first distributor is driven off of a shaft, normally off of the end of the... Yes, exactly. And then the second distributor is right next to it, and it's driven by a little belt off of the first distributor.
So you can have your ignition timing can be retarded or advanced on 2 different distributors in 2 different ways?
Well, they're mechanically linked to each other, so whatever one...
Until the belt stretches or moves or you get the timing wrong, or holy fuck, that seems like really dumb.
I guess you could get the spark plugs that potentially... Mostly what you get is you get spark only on one set of plugs, which is
ignition
the primary
timing
one.
is so precise that I'm amazed. Like you can, for example, on a... This is a mind fuck because if you think about it, the tension.
Well, how
of
are
a belt,
twin distributors usually actuated?
I don't know anything that has twin distributors. That's stupid. Why would you
Like
have twin
12-cylinder
distributors?
Ferraris always have 2 distributors.
That's true, and actually the V8 ones did too. They were both, but the V8 Ferraris were
One
each
for
driven
each
off a
bank.
cam,
Yes, off
right?
of one cam.
and it was.
So they're not. Their drive is not linked to each other. The drive is linked to.
The problem that I have
bank.
with the belt drive between the two of them, obviously it's a tooth to belt,
Mm-hmm.
but the distance between the two of them is what determines tension, is it not?
There's
Or does
probably
it
a
have a
tensioner.
separate
That's
tensioner?
probably a tensioner.
But isn't that going to change? I guess the belt can't stretch because I'm just thinking like, oh my God, you could be a quarter or a degree off by just over tensioning the belt. What a dumb fucking idea.
Yeah.
Second only to a 4-cam air-cooled motor, which needed shims to decide to do all
yes,
cam
yes.
timing, which is
Yes.
why they're like $50 million engines.
Yes,
To replace.
like 250, but yes, $250,000
$250
4-cylinder engine.
million engine. Yeah. This is fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm very interested to see how this car runs. It's always been a little wacky and has gotten progressively wackier in the last dozen years. And however many miles I put on the car, 20,000 miles.
My issue with cars lately is like I have a really hard time. So I have all these themes that recur, right? We're just talking about like the brake fluid and now wheel bearings. I have another one of timing. I have a really hard time timing cars. And I have 2 different timing lights that don't work properly and don't agree on anything. And so
Maybe you should shit can them both and buy a third one.
I guess, but in the case of like the Rover, it's all, you just disconnect a vacuum line, so because it's got a centrifugal advance and then a vacuum advance on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
So you disconnect the vacuum advance, which gives it full advance, and then you go in and you set the timing at 1200 RPM, which is just a centrifugal advance. You can't see the tach, and you can't trust old tachs anyway. So I have a multimeter with a tachometer, and those ignition pulses are dead even. They're right exactly where they should be, no problem. My VWs, the 2-liter 16 valves, both have cams in them, and they have a lumpy idle, and you never get 2 sparks in the same spot. So you're looking for the timing mark, and it's all over the place, and you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna guess it's over here, I'm gonna guess it's over there, and it's like not like you can check the timing at 2,000 RPM once it all smooths out. It's a fucking nightmare. Mm-hmm. And so for the last year, the Scirocco has been. I timed everything I went through. My fuel economy dropped by like 35 or 40%, and it's been driving me nuts to figure it out. Car doesn't want to run when it's cold, doesn't want to start. It cranks and stalls and then cranks and cranks and cranks and fouls its plugs and then stinks and is just miserable. Fucking timing was like 8 degrees off. And
How did you establish that?
Because I just reached in, loosened it, and fucking retarded it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, and all of a sudden, and I'm like, okay, put it back where it was, lumpy, miserable. And one of the characteristics of
so you're just going to do the auditory timing mechanism.
And one of the indications of too much advance is on very light load, you get a sort of surge, mm-hmm. which is what the Rover was doing. But you sort of get a little bit too much power and then a misfire, and a little bit too much power and then a misfire, right? So you bring it down and it smooths it out. I get that car totally fine within time, and it's what it feels like. It now drives better. I got 20% of my fuel economy back. It's happy all the time. It starts and stalls, but then starts right back up again.
Is it a Medtronic car?
It's CIS, even worse. Then the cabbie, I go and do I try to time that totally off. It's like 6-7 degrees off, and it only needs.
But that car runs.
Okay, runs fine. So I put it where the mark is dead on. Runs like shit. Mm-hmm. Leave me alone, guys. Just work with me here. Now I'm like the beat feels like it's got too much advance because it's doing a gnawing sort of like very
surge.
Difficult to control, at very slow throttle openings. I'm like, should I just mega squirt all of these cars or like Holley, like aftermarket EFI for all this stuff? Because then at least it's a trigger wheel and the ignition pulses will be consistent and it will be easier to check. It's pretty.
Then you start modifying stuff, which is like a whole other thing. I mean, I think we've discussed maybe doing an episode on that at some point.
I think we should. Yeah.
Whether it's suitable to modify cars or not.
The question that I asked, I think we should do this next week. The question that I asked you was, has there ever been a car that you've owned that you wouldn't modify? And then we should sort of look through our collections of cars that we own and like, what have we modified? What haven't we? What would? And because we talked about like what I would do to that.
Yeah.
That Rover. But yeah, there is a point, like I would love, we'll save this for next week, but there are things I would love to do, but I don't want, I don't have time.
Yeah.
But there are some modifications that I would do to cars that would change the functionality without changing the character. And adding fuel injection to a carbureted car probably wouldn't change the character of it if I kept ITBs. There's probably a way to do it.
Yeah, I have to get more experience doing that to see whether I totally agree with that or not. Other cars, are they all otherwise happy?
I think every one of the cars is drivable at the moment. So my rule, right? The rule is every car, if it has an item, that item needs to function. I'm meaning if it's equipped with air conditioning, the air conditioning is working, right? If somebody's ripped it out, like some asshole did on Beatrice, well then I'm not going to go put it back in because it's a nightmare. The only car that has a non-functional feature is the air conditioning in the Rover. Oof. So all the cars with AC have working AC.
My Citroën's air conditioning is not functioning.
I mean, first of all, we're heading into winter. Second, we're in the Bay Area. So that's the nice thing about living here is we don't need it most of the time. But as soon as you leave the Bay Area, you absolutely need it. And so that Rover would be like a beautiful road trip car. It's like long-legged. It's reasonably quiet inside. It's super comfortable. If I could do suspension on it and get the whole thing to stop shaking like a Parkinson's victim, I would love that, but it needs air conditioning. Mm-hmm. So maybe at some point I'll fix that. So
if it's missing, then you're okay to go with that. I guess I feel that way about air conditioning. Like my 964 didn't come with air conditioning; it had been removed, and I'm okay with it.
But the Mercedes doesn't have air conditioning. My wagon,
129 came without a hardtop, and that they all were originally sold with hardtops, and I did finally find one. I mean, that's a weird color, and so I did find one in Florida that I would have
You just pronounced Florida like a New Yorker.
That I would have bought, but how do you get a hardtop across the country for any reasonable amount of money?
You don't.
Yes.
It's a fortune. It's annoying.
Yeah. So like we paid $1,300 to ship a set of seats across the country from Florida.
You gotta. The trick is you buy a car, you put them in that car, you ship it, and then you sell that car. It's cheaper.
Yes, that is probably cheaper. But so I found one that was the right color, but it was in Florida, and so I was.
Did you do that on purpose?
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh, you did. Okay, the first time. I mean,
yes.
Okay, Florida.
And so I found a green one, which is the wrong color, but it had a tan interior and had a new headliner, which was like that last time I did one of those was $500 in an upholstery shop. So I said, I'm just going to color change this hardtop. A friend of mine brought it back from Merced on a white car. It looks awful. Dark green metallic hardtop on a white SL with a red interior.
Oh, wow.
So that was silly. But so now I have a hardtop. I just have to have it painted. And I'm getting a new soft top also.
I had my 996. Oh, that's expensive.
Yes, I know.
Ew. How much is a new soft top?
The soft top alone was $1,200 just for the soft top. And then installation is $1,500. Yeah.
So you're basically adding 50% of the value of the car.
Yeah.
We should also say R.I.P. to Bruno Sacco. We didn't.
Yes, we never specifically acknowledged that.
Out. Yeah. Poor Bruno. Lived a good life. Also, R.I.P. to Mike Valentine, passed away. Mm-hmm. They just released that it was an aneurysm. He was 74 years old, and I said he was just 74, and some dick bag on Instagram was like, "What do you mean only 74?" A healthy 74-year-old is a healthy 74.
Well, that person was probably 19.
True. Yeah. Who thought, they think I'm on the brink of death. Clarkson just almost died.
Yeah, I heard about that.
He had emergency heart surgery. Like, what the fuck? Everyone needs to stop with this shit. Dying's bad for you. Anyway, I had a 996 cab back in the day. And this car was a weird purchase because I was in law school and I had sort of stopped working and sold my company and then was in law school. And I had 5 cars, I think, and I needed something for the track because I was beating my VR6 Golf to death on the track. And I'm like, I got to stop doing this. I'm going through like a set of brake rotors or 2 every weekend. And this car was just getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And I just couldn't keep the oil cool enough. And so I need a track car, but I also really wanted a convertible. And there are very few cars that will do both things well. And I don't think I'd
Miata
quite discovered the joy of a Miata yet. This was 2004, so I guess NB. No, I was
End
not
of the
interested.
NB.
Yeah, I was not interested in NB. NC2 was the one that really got me because NC1, meh. Anyway, so I was looking at like Corvettes. I was looking at a bunch of things, and I wound up buying a 996 and cab, and then I found a hardtop for it. So it was a black. It was a black 996 cab, C2 cab, and I had a gray or silver hardtop on it. And you have used the R word in this episode, but I can't use this to refer to ignition timing. But I had a non-advanced ignition timing helmet on my Porsche. It really did look like a helmet. It was terrible, but it got me onto all the tracks. Once
they needed a factory hardtop to let you on.
I just think it was,
or you could have put a roll bar in.
No, it has pop up bars, so it was it passed the broomstick test, especially with Porsche Club. Like Porsche Club's not going to disqualify Porsche stuff, and Porsche Club's HPDEs were the best I've ever done. They were beautifully organized, and it didn't matter that I was in a Volkswagen; no one cared about that. And then I got the Porsche, and it was even better. But that car looked terrible, but I have all these pictures of it like horked over on track because of course I put like RA1s on it. I put sticky tires on it on soft convertible suspension. You can just see this thing leaning over with the stupidest looking hardtop on it.
Well, I bet it looked less stupid than white with green.
Probably. Yeah, that's a pretty
and hard. Mercedes did, not for the 129s, but for the 107 and the Pagoda, do a two-tone thing where the wheel, they had painted hubcaps, and the hubcaps and the hardtop would be the same color, and that would be different from the body of the car.
I could see like cream-colored top and wheels on a red car, for example, or something.
Yeah, or like dark blue hardtop and wheels on a cream or white colored car, or silver with blue, or something like that. There's a bunch of configurations that look pretty nice, but it was not something that was done during the 129 era, and I don't recommend it.
What was it? There's something 129y just happened. There was just a Cars and Coffee that you missed this past weekend. There's a show called Pre-Stage.
Oh, yes.
We've talked about, I think, we talked about their rally, whatever, and it's just sort of become the best car show in the Bay Area, and I hope no one's listening from the Bay Area. Don't come. There's already too many cars. And there are some, like, it's just one spectacular car after the next, and everyone's always talking about 129s there because they're just, well, not that everyone has them, but it's in conversation. This has just sort of become the car that, like, if you want an all-around amazing car that's relatively inexpensive to maintain, beautifully engineered, stunning to look at, great to drive, it's just become the car that I should hate more than 911s because it does more things better than any other cars.
That's interesting because they're all automatics, I guess, and almost all, except for the dogleg. That's interesting that there's getting so much mainstream airtime. We may have perhaps contributed to that a little bit with our discussions, but a guy at the Citroën event actually approached me. He's got a bunch of really cool Citroëns. He's like, I just want something else. And the 129 was there. And he said, yes, that. I've heard that those things are up and coming. Even, a boomer aged guy with a bunch of Citroëns apparently has heard that. I think
they already up and came. I mean,
yeah, but they're still cheap.
I think they're gonna remain cheap. They sold so many of them.
Yeah,
that I really do think that's the ultimate bargain in.
Yeah.
Oh, I know where they came up because
£4,000 though.
Somebody was looking at an E500 that was for sale, or it was an E500, but 124 500e, and apparently their prices have come way down.
Yes, they have.
And so this is a beautiful car for like $25,000. It's got a lot of miles on it, but that was a $40,000 or $50,000 car a couple years ago.
They're mileage sensitive. They're condition and mileage sensitive. A high mile car in great shape can sort of cap out. They were. I did see them reach into the low 40s for like a 150,000 mile plus car. That was really nice. Like they were in the 40s for a minute there, but yeah, I'd say that's now a $25,000 to $30,000 car.
Yeah, that's a hell of a car. Although, to your point,
yeah, but 129s,
129 is the same effective car underneath.
Yeah,
you don't get the back seats, you don't get the
you don't get the flares, but you get a convertible, and I think they're more dramatically styled, and you can get a great 129 with low mileage in the 10 to 15 window.
So crazy. I think I want one or 10 of them.
I mean, that's why I bought mine. I mean, I'd been looking for a long time for a 93 to 95 in 500 in a good color with low mileage, because the low mileage ones are so cheap. Why not get a low mileage? Why not get a low
mileage one? Yeah. One of the other things I did this past week that I keep meaning to talk about on this podcast is another power acoustic head unit in one of the cars. $151 from Walmart, shipped with tax, for a single DIN wireless CarPlay head unit. That is, it just got very bright in here.
The Rover is very well illuminated.
The Rover is now far too illuminated. We're going to hit the
British Leyland British Leyland lighting in here.
I think somebody in this complex probably has a remote control TV or something, and they just changed the channel, and our lights just went through the roof. That's bizarre. That it's a 71 something 71 is the head unit. I reached out to Power Acoustic and asked them to help. Give me more information and whatever else. But I'm
too attached to the vintage aesthetic.
Depends on the car. But for me, I have now 3 of these. I have one that is the loudest backup camera or backup BP thing. Sorry, what the shit is going on here? Like lights
Twilight
are going
Zone.
crazy. There's a clock over there that every minute gets really bright for a second and then gets
soon it'll start going backwards. That means there's probably an earthquake coming.
What's above us? We're fine. We should have an earthquake on the air.
I would rather not.
I mean, why not? Might as well have footage of it. It'll be cool. I have 3 of these Power Acoustic head units. CP71W is, I think, is the model name. They're $150. They wireless single DIN CarPlay, and it fit. So I have them in the Scirocco, the Cabby, and the E30 wagon, which are my sort of 3 road trip cars. It's spectacular. Like, it's, first of all, I don't know how many volts the subwoofer out, those 3 cars all have subs, how many watts that subwoofer out is, but I have to turn the gain down to 0 on all of my amps when they used to be up all the way. Huge subwoofer out, like a 12 or 16 band EQ, great DSP. They're fucking amazing. And I just think it's so cool that we're at a point where you can get CarPlay in an old car that just works. And so hats off to Power Acoustic. Again, I think they're not paying attention to their email addresses, phone numbers, or DMs.
Well, as long as they make a good product.
But they're making, is it perfect? No. Does it occasionally act a little bit weird? Yes. So does every other OEM's CarPlay integration. But when it's turned off, it is a blank black screen. And that's important to me. I don't want something that looks modern. Yeah. I'm now tempted to put one in the E31, the 850 CSI, and all the other cars for that matter. Is that
single DIN?
They're all of my cars are single DIN, except the Beat. The Beat already has Bluetooth. That's enough. And that's a Repro. I don't know if you know this. Honda's in-house radio supplier is called...
Isn't it like Carrozzeria or something like that?
No.
It's some weird name.
Oh, shit.
That Beat people will, of course, know.
Gathers. So you have a Gather stereo is actually Honda's sort of name. And the Beat had its own size radio that's never been used before since, as far as I know. And it had like a bunch of LED segments to do like a VU meters left and right. Honda Gathers re-released a stereo a couple of years ago, and it was a fortune. It was like $1,200, but it actually replaces the VU meter and whatever and the tape deck with a LCD screen, aux inputs that you can plug a wireless Bluetooth thing into, and it keeps the VU meters. They're just TFT now, and I have that in the car, which is pretty cool to get into a Beat and have wireless CarPlay.
That's like the vintage Blaupunkt with Bluetooth, which doesn't have a real screen, but it looks like a Blaupunkt SQR46 or whatever it is. I think it's a Bremen or something like that. And that is, looks exactly like it should in a mid-'80s car. Right. And there's a Continental one that a lot of people use. Those are pretty cheap.
They're only yellow background, I think. I think they're...
Yeah, it's got like a sort of amber. It looks like a 90s...
Mercedes
Becker unit.
Those are great.
And you can also resuscitate. You can add Bluetooth to the old Becker head units. You can send them back to Becker. Yeah. But you lose the cassette player if you do that.
So I did that on my 190. That, to me, that Becker with the
Grand Prix
up-down is just, I think, I have the wrong Becker in that car. The Becker that I have in there is the full-width LCD screen that's illuminated in white. 1 month earlier, which is when that car was produced, it should have had the half-width screen that's illuminated in yellow. And this is the radio that I found. It is what it is. I sent that out to Becker in New Jersey. They rebuild it and they put an aux in. They returned it to me with one of the light bulbs burnt out, and it's just been like 10 years, and I haven't been able to send it back to them and be like, here, fix this. But now they do Bluetooth.
Yes.
But to me, there's a difference. So you have all these choices for Bluetooth, right? There's also a guy on Instagram named BMW Radios who I follow, and I dream of one day buying one of those head units, but they're like $550. And they are the original like E30, E31, E36, whatever all those radios are. And he puts a Bluetooth module in there and has like, it can say custom shit on the screen, which I love, but it's just too expensive. Like my thought is I could have, for the E31, I could have that power acoustic CarPlay unit for $130, or I can have one that looks proper for $550. I just can't justify
I think it's worth it.
I have too much money. I have too much money invested in half of these cars, and I'm like feeling the financial crunch on it, so I got to stop. But I would be more tempted to do it if Apple made a sort of CarPlay Lite for Bluetooth connections. So the nice thing about CarPlay is, number one, I have Waze running in the background, and if it's on the screen, it never goes to sleep. And so you never miss out on a police notification or something else like that. That's number one. Number two, a text message comes in on CarPlay, and you just hit a button and it says, incoming message from DTS. Hey, asshole, are we filming today? ? Would you like to respond? Yes. What do you want to say? Derek, go fuck yourself. All right, sending the message. Derek, go fuck yourself. Send, modifier, whatever. It's just perfect. Even though you have the display, you don't even use it. It's a perfect conversation between you and Siri. When you're Bluetooth, it's not. It won't read text messages to you easily. And to me,
I don't use any of that anyway. I just don't care.
You're of a generation where you just probably hold your phone and text while you're driving.
Or when I arrive at my location.
One will never know, but you're certainly never going to admit either of those things on the. But there are times when I would like to drive an old car, but I do have work stuff happening or something's happening in the background, and it'd be nice to be reachable. And that's where I wish I would be more likely to go with one of the Bluetooth units if it had that sort of, if Apple did that.
Porsche makes a single DIN that has CarPlay. It's $1 bazillion. Land Rover, I think, has started making one too.
That's the Porsche
Classic.
They call it something else, PCM Classic or something, right?
Something like that. There's also a double DIN version that they make for 997s.
It's a double digit for 996s and 997s, but their 996 sort of single digit unit has like a 2.5 or 3 inch screen.
Yeah,
it's tiny.
quite small.
This power acoustic unit is, again, full width. The whole thing is a screen other than volume and mute and power on the side, they're very small. I would love to have a rotary control, but I think they did the right thing by maximizing the size of the screen. And you can change the color of the buttons, which is nice because green for Volkswagen, orange for BMW. That Porsche one I would be happy to have if it wasn't 10x the price.
Yeah, I think it's like $1,200 or something like
it's
that.
It's literally 10 times the price of that power acoustic one. I would love the power acoustic one even more, and I wanted to partner with them to help them do this if that screen was matte instead of gloss, because right now it's a glossy screen. And I tried to find like a stick-on.
Just put Clear Bra on it, like a phone screen thing.
Every one of them I find that I ordered from Amazon, the phone screen is a material that if you start to cut it shatters, because it's also a
Gorilla Glass
type thing. Yeah. So, but if I could find a screen thing that was just perfectly matte and none of the plastic was glossy, it wouldn't stand out at all. It looks like a radio blank out plate that you get like in an E30 or something, or E36 lightweight. I love it. I think it's so cool, and I wish I could. I'll try if there's a link. If there's a way for me to put a link to it on. In the description. So far, I've only found it at Walmart. I'd do a Amazon affiliate link if I could, but it's a good time to be an audiophile when for $130 plus tax, you can get a serious head unit that I'm sure wouldn't pass audiophile sort of specs, but no 80s and 90s car, single DIN car radio.
I mean, I bought a vintage Blaupunkt cassette player to put in the Citroën for the right look. I'm like just I'm at the place where I want it to have
aesthetically correct.
Yes, I want it to be complete time warp when I get in the car.
I did the same with the Ferrari. I mean, there was a radio in there that I think was non-functional, and it was too late.
No, it was functional, but it was probably 10 years newer than the car.
And so I put a vintage one in. The Mercedes has the correct radio.
Yeah. So that's kind of my general approach.
And the E31 has the correct radio. That one has a radio that the original owner installed. It's called a
Learjet. Yes.
But I think the receipt from that was from like 1988 or something.
Yeah.
Technically too new for the car. It's 8 years newer than the car.
It's such a
conversation
piece
of shit that I love it. But I don't want CarPlay in some of the experience cars. But if I do go on a road trip, it's nice to have.
Yes, I get it.
Maybe Beatrice. Beatrice is another one. She should have CarPlay because I always drive that to a track. It'd be nice to have. But
anyway, this episode was about I don't even know what, but I think we're probably.
I mean, we're supposed to have a topic, but we are an hour and 5 minutes in already, plus the intro.
Yep.
Okay, we're done. Goodbye. See you next week.
Right.